Welcome to Aston Means Business, a podcast from Aston Business School. My name's Steve Dyson, and I'm a journalist who's interviewing some of the UK's top business academics and support staff here at Aston. This podcast has been going since October 2019, and there are now more than 50 previous episodes that you can find and listen to by simply Googling Aston Means Business. Today's episode is going to explore how MBA students at Aston Business School can manage their careers, looking at a range of focused support available. We're going to explore this subject with Yasmin Ansari, MBA Careers Consultant at Aston Business School. Hello, Yasmin.
Hello, Steve.
Yasmin, first of all, tell us about who you are, what you were doing before you came to Aston Business School, and what you do here now.
Sure. So I'll start at the very beginning. I did my undergraduate degree in public policy, government and management, which is quite different to what I do now. I had quite a keen interest in politics at the time. So I went into the civil service following my graduation and worked with the Department for Work and Pensions for about 18 months on a fixed term contract. So this was during the financial crisis. So everybody was out of work, apart from people helping people get into work. So it made sense. After the contract ended, I had to think about what to do next. And as it happened at the time, the career service at my alma mater at the University of Birmingham was doing a massive recruitment drive. So there was about 30 or so new staff being recruited. So I joined the team there, started off as an applications advisor, mostly doing CV support, interview guidance to students there. And then eventually, after about 8 years, I thought, okay, I've seen enough now. I need to move on a little bit. So I had a look at some opportunities. What I liked about the role being advertised at Aston, the MBA careers consultant role, was that it would enable me to specialize. So that's why I joined Aston, and that's why I'm here now. So the job that I'm doing now, largely focused around career support for MBA students, so looking at all three modes, online, full-time and part-time.
The job title as MBA Careers Consultant, it does sound very specific. So from what you're saying, you're focused entirely on MBA students at Aston Business School.
Yep, that's correct. So it is MBA only. So we've got a full-time MBA cohort that runs twice a year. So I look after them. I would say I primarily look after them. I spend most of my time with the full-time MBA students because as the name implies, they're here full-time. They're not working alongside their course. So they need a lot of support, and I teach them as well. So I teach a module called the Aston Edge, which is all about career skills and behaviour science. And that runs throughout the whole year. So they get 3 terms of me teaching them. And then there's the online MBA, which runs 6 times a year, I think, at the moment. We've got 6 cohorts, small cohorts that join up to 20. And then the part-time MBA, I don't know the numbers for that. I'm not as heavily involved in it. But again, there is the element of careers support if they need it. So what sometimes happens is students will think about what's next within their career, even if they're already employed, even if they're already in management positions, they're often thinking about what's next, or should I change career direction? How can I develop myself further in the role that I'm in? So there's lots of different ways all the different types of students would want to engage with me and my team.
Describe the offer that you give to them, Yasmin. What do you actually do for all these MBA students?
I'll probably go by each component if that makes the most sense, because there's a lot of different areas within the job role itself. So I'll start by focusing on the one-to-one guidance, which is typically what people expect somebody who is a careers consultant or a careers advisor does. So students can book an appointment with me to talk about their career plan. They can also talk to me about practical advice, such as their CVs, their job applications, job searching strategies, how to network effectively, how to use their network, what kinds of opportunities, events, things like that. So the scope is quite broad, I would say. I'll give you an example. So a full-time MBA student might come to me saying, Yasmin, I really want to get into consulting. Please, can you help me with getting into consulting? So we might start at looking at what their background is and how they might use their experience to get into the consulting industry. So we might then look at their CV. We might talk about how they could build on those skills, such as what is a part-time role they could do, or what is an internship they could do that could help them develop the skills they need to become a consultant. But then if I compare that to somebody who's an online student or an executive MBA student, they might be coming to me with a very different query, such as, this is the job I'm currently in. I really want to be an executive or non-executive board member. How do I access those kinds of roles? And then the approach might be similar in the sense of analyzing and evaluating their experience, looking at what they've done, but then also considering how they apply that to those roles. So the nature of the inquiries that I get for the one-to-one guidance can be very different, but a lot of the time it's about analyzing the background, making the most of the skills and the experiences they have, thinking about the outside context of the labor market or the opportunities that are there, and then bringing those two things together.
I bet you get a real range of aspirations from students. You've obviously helped many over the last few years to get into all sorts of jobs and roles. Can you give me a few examples of what you've helped MBA students to do?
Yeah, sure. Again, it's quite broad, partly because the students that study with us come from lots of different backgrounds. So we have students who previously worked in IT or engineering or even healthcare. Some who've worked in other public sector organizations. We've got someone on our full-time MBA program who was previously a mayor of a town.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, we get quite a huge spread in terms of background. So that also often means that their interests are quite different. So in terms of some of the areas that I've supported them into, so there are some students who want to start their own business. So there's a program at Aston called Be Seen. So they work with the Be Seen team to then launch their business if that's what they want to do. Or in some cases, they already have a business back home, like a family business, and they're using the MBA and the skills they get from the MBA to then go back and take over that business. In terms of employment, so I mentioned consulting earlier as an example, partly because quite a lot of our full-time MBA students have ambitions to become consultants. So we do get graduates who go work for the likes of PwC and Accenture and some of those types of organizations. But we also have students who work for smaller businesses, for SMEs, or who work locally. Some even start their own freelance consultancy business. So there are lots of different ways they can apply themselves. One of the things that we do as part of the remit of my team is I have a team member who looks after the MBA projects. So all MBA students have to do a business project at the end of the course, which is basically their dissertation. And a lot of them can do that working with a business. And we have had examples of students who've worked with that business and then secured a job. So I remember a few years ago, there was a lady who worked with an electrical vehicles company. It was electrical vehicle fleets specifically. And they liked her so much, and they were like, we don't have a job in the business at the moment, but I've got a contact at this business and they've definitely got a job going, so we'll introduce her to my colleague at this company. And that's how she ultimately got a job. So
Oh, that sounds good.
I think some of the other things that are worth mentioning as well that MBA students get access to that aren't just within my own remit, but things like mentoring. So all our full-time MBA students and also the online executive, but it's less used by the executive, primarily the full-time MBA students, can have an alumni mentor. So this is somebody who's previously studied at Aston, usually an MBA, but not always the case. So some of our mentors come from other degree backgrounds, to guide them while they're with us. And that can be, again, through making contacts, to having a listening ear, to talking things through, to helping with the decision-making process. So I think even though my job is a careers advisor that helps people with their career, it's unrealistic to say they should only be talking to me. They should be talking to lots of people to get lots of perspectives, and to use other people as a sounding board as well.
Yeah, your direct support of such a range of careers for MBA students must keep you really busy, Yasmin.
Mhm.
But you've already mentioned that you deliver a specific module for MBA students that helps them to start managing their own career. Tell us more about the Aston Edge module.
So the Aston Edge, again, is available on each of the modes of the different MBA programs. And the majority of the content is aligned, but it's tailored based on the type of student. So on the full-time MBA, I do quite a lot of career skills like CV writing, networking, interview practice, assessment center practice, because a lot of the students, or well, most of the students on the full-time MBA are very much focused on what's next after the MBA. I need to apply for jobs. I need to secure a job role. So there's a lot more pressure in terms of the career-based skills. We do also offer sessions that are more behavior science based. So things like motivation, reflection, negotiation, game storming, and innovation. Yesterday, we did a session on success mindset and confidence building. So there are a lot of different components to it. But in terms of meeting the overall learning outcomes, it's very much about self development and thinking about how all the different strands of the MBA tie together to develop essentially what is a future leader. So the Aston Edge helps students do that. As part of their assignment, they have to do reflection. So they have to look back and think about what they learned, how they developed their skills, how they're then taking this new built package into the workplace, so to speak. We also invite guest speakers on the Aston Edge. So I often reach out to people such as alumni. So via the mentoring scheme, there are sometimes alumni members who also want to do sessions, who want to talk. So I will invite them. I have people talking about consultancy, leadership, crisis management. We have internal staff members talking on topics like intercultural business communications, project management. There's many different topics.
With hundreds of students a year to support, plus delivering that module, Yasmin, it sounds like you've got a very busy role. Tell me about the staff that help you to deliver all that.
Thankfully, I do have staff who help me. So at the moment, I'm managing two people within my team. I have an MBA careers advisor and an MBA employer relations manager. So the MBA employer relations manager looks after the MBA projects, but also gets involved in some of the events. So events that happen outside of taught modules and curriculum, and employer engagement in general. So sometimes an employer might say, okay, we've got a graduate scheme that we're setting up, but we'd really like it to be for an MBA student. Can you help us advertise that? Um, he also works with various stakeholders, both within and outside the university. There are a lot of networks in Birmingham, as you probably know. So there's quite a lot of things happening within the business sphere regionally. And then the MBA Careers Advisor, our roles are quite similar, I would say. So I think the main difference for me is the leadership. So leading of the team, leading of the modules, leading of the career strategy. And the MBA Careers Advisor is quite hands-on. So one-to-ones, teaching, helping students with queries. That is primarily her remit.
Thinking about careers advisors from my own school days, Yasmin, I often felt they were very general and had little connection or idea of the huge range of careers out there.
Mm.
And it sometimes felt like just another lesson or even a time when you felt judged as an individual for having little focus. But it sounds like the career management at Aston Business School is a lot more focused and engaged and directed on individual needs.
Yes, and one of the really beautiful things about working with MBA students is we don't have a problem of unengaged students. Our students are super ambitious, super driven. I would say pretty much each and every one of them has got at least some idea about what they want to do or the direction they want to go in. And it's not bad if there's somebody who doesn't, because of course, life isn't perfect. We don't always know what we want to do at every given point within our lives. But in terms of actually reaching out, in terms of attending, lectures and coming to one-to-one appointments and coming for assessment advice, sometimes I just can't get rid of them. There are those who will come again and again and again. So
Great.
that's one of the great things is the students themselves are quite engaged. So it's really important that we have the right support available and that there are times for them to come in and speak to myself or my colleague. There's a lot of cross collaboration as well within the university. So I mentioned other stakeholders earlier, but we work closely with the Central Careers and Placements team who look after all the other students. So we make sure that we connect on some of the things that we do, such as support specific to international students, or if there is an employer who might be interested in different types of students. So we make sure that we work with other departments at the university to tie up some of those connections. And also within the wider MBA team. So with the program directors who, of course, again, meet with a lot of the students. So if there's an issue, we are all on the same page. We all know what's going on. Or if there is a student who's a little bit stuck or a little bit unsure, then we've all communicated. We know what's going on. So I think that collaborative piece is what really helps steer the ship sometimes. And it's really important.
It's really interesting, actually, to hear you talk about how the MBA students are very driven and very involved in what they want to do. And the reason I say that is because I can see from looking at your own profile on LinkedIn that you're studying for an MBA yourself. So
I
you're in
am.
there with them. Tell us about that.
Yeah. It's a difficult one to juggle, I'll be honest. I am currently stressed about writing an assignment. So I'm doing the part-time version of the MBA, specifically the degree apprenticeship. So I don't have to come onto campus for lectures very often. They work as individual study days per module. So most of it is taught distance learning, which means I very much have to manage my own time, which is a whole other challenge. I'm not going to get into now because I'll be here all day. So it can be difficult to juggle. I'm not in a situation where I'm having to teach myself because, as I mentioned at the beginning, the executive MBA or the part-time MBA is largely managed by other academic staff that I don't have as much interaction with as I do on the full-time MBA. I spend most of my time working with the full-time MBA students. And for the Aston Edge, there's a different module leader for the part-time executive. So there isn't that kind of conflict of interest, but it does feel a little bit weird being on the other side sometimes. I often find that I'm the person in the WhatsApp chat talking people down from a ledge when there's somebody going, I can't do this anymore. Or or just kind of sort of sharing administrative things because I'll get people saying, what do I do about this and who can I ask about that? And yeah, it's a little bit of a difficult one to balance. I also find myself very, very easily sliding into the student role. So I will complain if I need to complain. I will ask for an extension on my assignment if I need to.
Excellent.
So yeah, it's an interesting one to balance, but I am enjoying it. I really think that there is a huge amount of stuff that I've already learned that I'm also already applying. So I'm already walking around seeing the world through an entirely different lens than I did 9 months ago before I started the program. I will go to a coffee shop, for example. So I go to Pret on the way to work to get a drink, and I'll stand in the queue and I'll look at what they're doing behind the till, and I can see the process through which they get the orders out. And I'll go,
Right. Yeah.
oh, that's very lean. I remember learning about this in the operations module. So they've clearly set it up in a way that they get the orders out really, really fast. So I just can't help but see everything through the MBA lens everywhere I go. And I just start thinking about things and going, I've read about this, or I've seen this, or I understand why this is the way it is because I've learned about it on the MBA.
It's interesting to hear you talk about it in that way, and for anyone else who's thinking of taking an MBA, what kind of assets and inputs and outputs do you think that Aston Business School gives you? I mean, you mentioned one or two there in terms of how you even find yourselves looking at the processes in a coffee shop. But what is it about MBAs here at Aston that are so important for people in developing their careers?
Yeah, I think one of my personal favorite things about the program at Aston specifically is experiential and case-based learning. So everything is applied. A lot of the modules use simulations, case studies, real life applications. So on the full-time MBA, the students do 2 business challenges in a year, which means they work with an actual business on a real problem they're facing, and they work in teams to develop a set of recommendations that they then present to that business. So a lot of it is real time and applied. Um, we do a flipped classroom approach, which means students co-create the learning. I can talk about this specifically in relation to the Aston Edge. I don't just tell the students loads of stuff. I often ask questions that involves them telling each other stuff and telling me stuff. And then sometimes they'll tell me things that I then tell the next group because I've learned something new. So they co-create the learning. There's high levels of interactivity, a lot of group work, but also some independent work. The Aston Edge, of course, is kept up to date with labour market trends. So, for example, last week or maybe the week before, I was teaching an Aston Edge session on the online MBA, and I had to update it literally the evening before I taught it because now everybody's talking about AI, and my session was on the future of work. So I can't ignore the fact that we've got AI and ChatGPT and all these things. So I built in a new section into that webinar to make sure it was up to date and that we were addressing some of the things that are happening out there. I also know that the program overall is being updated, so there's a cybersecurity pathway now on the full-time MBA. I think some of the other things outside of the curriculum that work well with the Aston MBA are things like our relationships with local and global businesses, the strong alumni base. Of course, having the different modes of study can help suit different lifestyles. So somebody who's working full time and doesn't want to give up their job may prefer to do the online MBA or the part-time MBA, so they can be a bit more flexible with their study. And finally, we have a highly engaged support team. So I can only speak for myself, but I know the same goes for some of our admin support as well. Is we are really there for our students. If a student emails me, I'm probably more likely to respond to them than if a member of staff is prodding me about something I haven't done. So students first, I think, is one of the things um, that we really value.
I want to ask you one more question, Yasmin.
Sure.
For those listening out there who are thinking of their working lives after the MBA they're taking, what are your top tips that can help them think and plan how to manage their careers?
Sure. So the first thing I think is having a plan, but being flexible. I'm not a huge fan of the whole "what do you want to be in 5 years' time" or "what job do you want to have." I would rather ask somebody what kind of person they see themselves being 5 years from now, because it gives more scope for somebody to think about their personal and professional development. And some of the things that we do on the Aston Edge is try to tell students that instead of being overly focused on being a specialist, being really good at one thing, that it's okay to have lots of different interests and actually have several strings to their bow. Um, Things like consciously tracking professional development. So, of course, as part of our program and as part of the assignments, they write a sort of a smart action plan where they track their goals. But I think even informally, having some idea about what some of those potential steps might be, or even looking back and thinking about, well, what have I done so far? Where have I been before this? Not being afraid to ask for help. I think that's a really big one with anyone managing their career, whether they're an early careers person, whether they're really senior or looking to become really senior. There's absolutely nothing wrong with asking for help. Networking, so networking a lot and fostering the relationships. I think going out to a networking event or going on LinkedIn with the goal to just get a job isn't necessarily the most productive way to network and to build good relationships, but using networking as an opportunity to learn, to see what else is out there, what's going on in the world, can be really useful and really beneficial. And then the last thing, which is kind of linked to the networking piece, but keeping in touch, because we do have quite a vibrant alumni community and we love welcoming graduates back to attend events or even just come along to things, whether they're contributing in some shape or form as a mentor, as a speaker or whatever, but just joining us and coming back to see us.
Yasmin Ansari, MBA Careers Consultant at Aston Business School, many thanks for taking part in this episode of Aston Means Business.
Thank you for having me.
And thanks to you, our audience, for listening to Aston Means Business, an original podcast series for Aston University. Remember, if you've enjoyed today's episode, you can find and listen to earlier episodes by simply Googling Aston Means Business. And if you're interested in studying an MBA at Aston Business School, simply Google Aston MBA to find out more. And if you want more information about developing your career as an MBA student, you can Google Aston MBA Career Development and you'll find plenty of information there. We'll be back soon with more interviews with some of the UK's top business academics and support staff here at Aston. Aston Means Business. Thanks for listening.